is.
Hey.
Jenny, welcome to Rebel Book Club. I'm going to give you your own virtual cheer as well, seeing as we were handing them out to Rich. You know, just like that. How are you doing?
I'm well, thanks. I feel... Oh, thank you for that.
There it is. There's 95 Rebel Book Club cheering for you.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
There you go.
I thought I was a little bit underdressed when I saw Ben 1, but then I think I'm wearing the exact same outfit as Ben 2, so...
Very on brand.
Nailed it.
Yeah, exactly. You got one of it. You got one that's right. Where are you joining us from, Jenny?
I'm in Squamish, BC, so unfortunately no cocktails for me. It's 11 a.m., so I'm on tea.
That's right, because we were watching your latest Instas, and you were obviously out on a snow bike. Is that been happening this week, or is that from way back?
Yeah, that was Sunday. So it's not a snow bike. It's just a bike that I took out in the snow, and I crashed really hard, just for the record. A little bit of
You're
ice.
supposed to be a pro now, right? Like you are, captain of Team Tough Women, and still you're trying things for the first time.
Yeah, it's a good title, actually, captain. I like it.
Team captain. Well, listen, thank you for joining us from the other side of the pond. And I guess we would love to start. So we have like over 90 Rebel Book Clubbers with us tonight. Obviously, we're going early with a meet this month. So the assumption is that people have definitely started, but probably haven't finished the book. But the beauty of your book is that it works really well for jumping in and out and going all over the place. We've got these polls going on, and if you heard about that early on, so we can see which stories are already making an impact on our community. But we'd love to hear to start with like a bit where because obviously we only got a snippet of you in the book, pretty dramatic one, a really powerful start. You're like shit. It's like Stallone all over again. But like, tell us a bit more about your backstory. Like, how did you end up on that cliff face? What led you to that spot?
So I'm on a project to try and run solo and unsupported across a mountain range on every continent. And that was my first one. And the idea was, I'm from Canada, obviously, and the Rocky Mountains. But I've been living in Scotland for the last decade, and I love it there, and I love the UK, but the thing that I miss the most is mountains, and I always feel at home in mountains no matter where they are. So wine was involved. Let's be clear, wine was involved when I decided I should go to this country called Kyrgyzstan that I didn't know where it was or how to pronounce it, but the mountains looked really cool. And again, with the wine, decided I could just run across the whole country. No one had ever done it, man or woman. I thought that was really cool. There's no trail, there's no route, so I had to actually play explorer and go old-fashioned and try to figure out how I was going to do it and solve all the problems. So everything about it was really exciting to me, and it was by far the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life at that point. And yeah, what can I say? Don't look at maps when you're drinking is what I've learned.
But was this a pattern in your life before that? Obviously, the big decision, drunk decision to do that. Had you like pushed yourself out? Had you made instinctive decisions to go, I'm going to go and try this before? Because we're curious about like what leads people to go out into the wild, into nature, and try and live or have a different kind of experience. What are the triggers that like, if you're curious about that you might, other than just drinking and looking at a map, is it as simple as that, or were there other threads that led you?
Well, I was really lucky growing up with access to the outdoors. Growing up where I did, went on lots of camping trips, and I learned lots of outdoor skills and had lots of time in the Canadian Rockies, which is just such a vast wilderness. So I think from a young age, I had a really strong connection with nature, and maybe I couldn't put it into words for a long time, and I didn't really understand like the mental health aspect of it and all that. But I knew it was something that I missed and I craved when I wasn't getting enough of it. So when I grew up and moved out, I found that calling to go back. And as I traveled around the world, I always found myself just wanting to be in wild areas. And for me, there was a real strong connection between being in that wild area, but then also pushing myself physically. So taking the sport element and adding it to my time in nature. So always trying to like cycle or climb or run or something silly. I really liked that combination of the two things.
It's really cool. And we were wondering this, actually, we were speaking just beforehand about how you managed to create this amazing collection of women. Do you somehow enter into like this kind of clique when you hit a certain level of extremity? Or how did you decide to choose or collect the women and their stories in your book, which Samaya's also asked?
Yeah, it was I mean, it was kind of a realization that I'd finally reached a point in my career where I had enough clout that someone would publish a book that I suggested. So I approached a publisher and said, this is my idea. And they said yes right away. That I had this ability to give a platform to these women who totally deserve a platform. And some of the women in this book are women that I look up to that are further along in their careers than me. And some of the women are younger and they're upcoming, and I wanted to give them that opportunity. So there's a lot of different women. As far as how I decided about them, it was really just I wanted cool women whose stories need to be heard. And obviously there's some top shelf women in there that everyone knows, and that's kind of necessary for getting a book published, is you got to have these big names. And I was really honored that people like Sarah and then Anna McNuff and Anne Daniels would write for me. And then there's also women who had never published anything before. And I just had heard about them. I kind of put the feelers out, said to everyone, I'm doing this project. Who do you know? And names started flying at me.
Amazing.
I was really curious, Jenny, about like the diversity of the stories you brought together. Was it because it feels like you're literally jumping, not just the type of women, but and their backstories, but obviously the diversity of types of adventures they're going on. You know, the kayaker who was, you know, joining an activist group, but it, you know, was like hardcore adventuring. I was just saying before, the Swedish woman Svensson, who just was like, had a bad breakup and then just went on this mission around Europe to climb, like went crazy and just climbed everything. Like, how did you deliberately go, right, okay, I've got a mountain climber here. Now I need a biker. Now I need an activist. Now I need a, you know, how did you curate and package it?
So I actually didn't have to work that hard to build that diversity. And this is a real bugbear for me, that if you go into any bookshop and you find a section that's themed on adventure, you will see one demographic and you will see one narrative. This whole, like, you know, ex-military British white male, like conquer the mountain peak kind of thing. And that's not actually what the adventure industry is like. It's not really what the outdoors industry is like. You know, the outdoors is a very creative field. And so actually, I didn't have to work very hard to get these different narratives, because that's actually what exists. It's just not what's represented at the highest level. And that's one of my favorite things about this book, is that there are just so many different narratives. The only thing that ties these women together is the fact that they are female. But other than that, you know, they all express their toughness in different ways. They all engage with nature in different ways. And that's not something that I had to work to make happen. That was just natural.
That's really cool.
And, sorry, Ben, go ahead.
I was going to throw in the question from Gunter, who says, how do you translate your findings of connecting with nature or becoming nature into your own practice? And did you develop some of your own tools and processes over time?
Yeah, I mean, it is very personal, and something that, you know, every person will cultivate throughout the course of their life if they let it happen. For me, it's, you know, I've thrown myself into quite a lot of outdoor environments and a lot of challenges that built up my own skills and built up my own engagement with nature. But like I said, when I was a child, I wasn't very conscious of it. I just, like, it was something that was there. That was a big part of my life, but I couldn't verbalize it. I assumed that everyone else went into the biggest mountain ranges in the world every weekend. I didn't know. And now, you know, now I'm a lot more conscious of it and consider it like a relationship and a pillar in my life that's really important, if that makes any sense.
No, it does, totally. And
then in terms of this relationship that all the tough women in your book clearly have with risk, obviously you can't speak on behalf of all of them, but so you get on top of that cliff where it was really touch and go from the way you described that climb, and then of course you describe, like, and then you get on and you just carry on, and once the adrenaline subsides, you just like, okay, I move on and keep going. Whereas at the time you talk about the fact that I'm never going to do this again. This is it. I've just got to get through this, and then I can retire, and that's it. I quit. And you hear the echoes of that story, I think, or we all hear it in lesser extreme forms in other parts of our lives. So whether it's a tricky relationship or like even like things like running marathons, like, I'm just going to get through this and never again. What is it that pulls us back? Like, what is the thing that pulls you back to go, okay, I'm going to learn from that, but I'm still going to take calculated risks? What's the drug?
Unfortunately, there's no pill. Well, I'm sure there are plenty of pills that work for it, actually. I made this rule a long time ago that's never quit while you're crying. You're always going to have these crisis moments where everything is just so extreme and you can't handle it. And we get that in life all the time. And that's just not your moment to make big decisions. So I know that if I'm feeling really just overdoing it on everything, that is not the time to actually quit. I mean, at that particular moment in the book, I really did think I was going to die. So it was a good reason to quit. If you're going to die, go home. But what it is that draws you back, I guess, if it's important to you, you're going to find a way to do it. And you just need to calm yourself down and solve your problems, and be there for the right reasons. I know that every woman in this book does have her own relationship with risk, and that is something that changes throughout our lifetimes as well. And we'll be in different places versus for where we are in our lives. But you can't have an adventure without any risk. Like that's just, I would think that's kind of the definition of adventure, is that it has to have risk in it. So, and same with life. You don't get any choice about that.
Totally. It's the same as making decisions when you're tired. It's not the same level, right? It's not life or death, but or hungry, or exactly. It's never a smart thing. And then nature itself. So in these remarkable stories that are just so full of drama. I was actually messaging with Anna McNuff today, who we've crossed paths with before, and she couldn't make tonight because she's about to have a baby. She's just moved into a house and she's got to prioritize her yoga and well-being, which is fair enough. Anyway, she sends a love to everyone here. And we, this whole thing of the spaces between, like, so you hear about, the cliffs and the falls and the real highs and the real lows, but the majority of your trips is the space in between, right? So where not much happens, or it's quite mundane, there's a lot of repetition. I'm curious about whether those spaces in between, when you're in nature, what that's like. It's like, do you ever reflect back on the big periods of time in between the drama? They go, okay, this really shaped me in this way, or I learned something from it, or is it only when the intense parts of the trip arise?
Yeah, that's a really good question. No, I think the spaces that are in between are actually what you went there for in the first place. You didn't want the big highs and lows. If you're well planned, they shouldn't have shown up, right? You just want it all to be smooth sailing. That's what you planned for. That's what you prepared for, that's what you signed up for, was for everything to go right. So I do get a lot out of those. Sometimes I can't really account for those hours, I find it so meditative to be moving my body and to be outside and to be in a place that I've never been before. That's, for me, my favorite sensation is when I'm somewhere that I've never been. I'm seeing things I've never seen. So those hours, I sometimes feel like I lose them. Like if you stopped me halfway through the day and said, "How was your morning?" I'd be like, I don't know where I was. I won't remember it. So I've had to actually try and be more conscious of that. And that's something that being a writer and taking pictures has actually helped me with, is to try and make sure that I keep a record of these things, because otherwise I'll just be too happy to actually remember it. If that makes sense.
You're in the flow. Time disappears.
Exactly.
Hey, we got other questions coming in, Ben.
There's a few coming in. I was also going to ask about, obviously we're in a bit of a weird space at the moment, and typically December, January is the time when everyone's like, right, what's the big thing I'm going to do this year? I'm planning a trip or a race. We're now being kind of flung into this sort of unknown, and we're not quite sure if we're going to be able to travel or kind of whether a grand adventure is possible. And it almost feels actually like book-wise we've come full circle, because we read The Doorstep Mile back in January by Al Humphreys, which is all about kind of that first step away from your front door and getting out into nature. And do you have any advice for this kind of strange limbo period, and how people can still go out and get some kind of fix and not feel that if you don't do something grand, it's not an adventure?
You know what? Last month I was finding it really hard, because I just come through a quarantine, because I've been back in the UK, so I quarantined, and then I crashed my bike and hurt myself, and then we had new restrictions. So it was just like I went through this long period of not being able to do anything, and then we went back inside. And so I realized, I only really go out for the big things, and so I set a challenge for myself to start doing anything that I was going to do inside. Say, could this be done outside? So I was like just taking my thermos out for coffee, I just went out for a lot of coffee and did yoga outside and just did things outside. And it would be not comfortable because it was November and the weather was kind of crap. But you know what? I've got jackets for that. Hot cup of coffee, like you can't argue with it. And sometimes it would only be 20 minutes, but just forcing myself challenged myself to just be outside a little bit more. Obviously, if you can. Like, I'm lucky I live in a small town with lots of nature around. But yeah, that would be my advice, is like, don't be hard on yourself about it. Just find something small. You can make small changes and they will actually really help. Like, it really helped me.
What's the, for the majority of us who are in cities, what's the, like, have you spent time in big cities? And if so, how have you had urban adventures?
Yeah. And I think that's why I'm a runner, really, is because I always like being in new places, and running for me, I would hate doing the same run too often. Every time I go to London, I go for a run, and every time I go to London, I get wildly lost, and I love that. And I'll kind of like run just like at every corner saying right or left, and then just making a decision, and take yourself on a little adventure. And then at some point I'll realize I'm exhausted and I have no idea where I am. I'm going to have to find my way back to my hotel. And it's always the second part of the adventure is that panic. But yeah, I think in cities, you can definitely set yourself challenges where running, walking, photography, whatever you're into, like there's so much fun to be had and so many streets that you probably haven't seen yet.
Yeah, I love that. You can turn up anywhere in the world and it's cheap transport. Yeah. I'd love to hear a couple of your reflections on the stories in the book. Like, how long's it been out now? Has it been out a year?
No, it came out in August. We were delayed from printers not being able to print things.
Okay, it was ready last year, but it's just come out. Okay, yeah. So, but you've been working on these stories and pulling it to get this project together for a while. Like, which stories right now are really from the book are resonating with you? Which ones are kind of like, because I'm sure it changes over time. You're like, oh, this one again, or you follow all these amazing women on social channels and you see their stories pop up again. But which stories at the moment are kind of standing out for you? And perhaps you could share one or two with everyone here, because not everyone would have read them.
Yeah, got a book handy. The last woman, so they're all in alphabetical order. It's not just,
oh, that's how it's done.
Yeah,
there you go.
Very diplomatic. So the last woman in the book, Bidangi, she's the youngest writer in the book by far. When she went on her adventure that she writes about, she was 19. To cycle around the world, which is like mega. So I loved Bidangi's story, and also speaking to her now. Like, I was speaking to her a couple weeks ago, and you know, she's so young and she's so ambitious, and she's at this phase of her life where it's all new. Everyone doubts her because she's young, but she really believes in herself. I've never met someone her age who has so much self-belief. It's so inspiring every time I speak to her. But what I find good about her story right now is that, you know, it's someone who's making something for themselves, someone who's saying, I don't have any circumstances to jump off of. I'm just going to do it anyway. And I think a lot of people in the last year have taken a look at their life and said, well, what would I change when the world goes back to normal? Do I want my normal to look different? So it's kind of that, just thinking about starting fresh and just having the ambition to do something that you don't know if you can do. No one knows if you can do, starting new kind of period of your life. So I really like Bidangi for that. I'm going to look through these chapters. Beth French. Did you guys read Beth French, Swimmer? Yeah. She's an incredibly inspiring woman. And again, it's someone who just looked at her circumstances and said, I don't want this. This can be better. I can be something different. And she went through having serious health issues when she was young. She was in a wheelchair to being this record-holding open water swimmer who just, like, I can't wrap my head around the stuff that she does. I think it's so gnarly and so huge. But she led that change for herself. Nothing was handed to her. You know, life handed her tons of obstacles, but she just said, no, I can do better. I can be different.
I love her story too. And Siren Song. Yeah. And she puts her daughter to bed, I think, in Dover, and then in the caravan in Dover, and then just gets in the middle of
to France.
To France. But the great thing about that, and I noted this down about her story, was that so she's 10 hours in, and the support boat into swimming in the dark, and the support boat says, and she thinks she's, she can see the lights of France. She thinks she's an hour or so away. The support boat gets there, and the currents change. It's going to be at least 3 hours. So you imagine the psychological blow of that, when you're basically well beyond your comfort zone of capability. And then she says in the story that she had to then question why she was going to keep going. And so she thought about her children it wasn't enough because they would always be proud of her and like her family, which is really interesting, right? And ultimately had to come back to her and like, I'm doing this for myself, not for anything else, just to prove to myself that I can do this. And that rawness and like singularity I loved, because it was like, whoa, how do you dig deep, really deep? Because everyone else is going to be going, whoa, Beth, that's enough. You're amazing. But that's what she did, and she did it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely just love that story, and everything I read of hers, I find really inspiring. It's that moment where you find out what you're really made of and why, you know, knowing that all this stuff is actually just pointless to everyone else. It's really, you're the only one who finds the stuff, your challenges that seem like the world. It's really just down to you. You're the only one who really cares. So that, you know, do it for yourself. Don't do it for anyone else. Yeah.
Great lesson. More questions, Ben, coming in.
Yeah, we've got some really good ones, actually. Chris Davey, who is a big cyclist I know, referenced the book we read about Marie Colvin, the war correspondent. And one thing that he took from that she said was that often her addiction to risk made her struggle slightly with kind of mundane, normal life. And do you ever feel like adventures disrupt any other elements of your life? And do you take steps to potentially address this?
Yeah, I do, actually. It's hard when you come home from the intensity of a real expedition. Like, you know, I have several examples of times I thought I would die. And on these expeditions, I have to be so unlucky. I have to be so, or things are going to go for me because I'm out there alone. Home to be really difficult when I like went from an environment of literally every decision I make, including like what time I eat and how much I have, could affect my health and my mortality, to suddenly just being home in the Western world and everything's comfy and easy. I do find that a little bit difficult. And then also just maybe appreciating other challenges that other people go through at the same level, when I'm like, well, did you think you were going to die? It can't be that bad. You know, like there's an empathy issue. So yeah, there's a little bit of that. It's a lesson I've had to learn the hard way. When I got back from running across Kyrgyzstan, I had the post-adventure blues really bad, and it wasn't something I expected. When I thought about recovering from an adventure, I only thought about I should do a lot of yoga and, you know, start running again soon. I didn't realize I had to mentally recover from adventures. And so that's something that, and it's not something that I knew about because no one told me, you know, it's not something that we talked about very much. So like other adventures that I knew, they didn't really have the answers either. So it's something that I've had to just learn over time, that emotional recovery is a thing, and it's an important thing.
Yeah,
it's really interesting
to plan for it. I was you've gone grey screen on us, by the way, Jenny. So it looks like you're in a cave.
I can still see Jenny. Okay.
Can you? Oh, it's just me. Oh, she's just like oh, you're back for me now. It's okay. It's all good. We could hear you all the way through.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just thinking about in terms of the people who are always thinking about, oh, how do I get into this? Going back to Al's book, The Doorstep Mile, and often it's a question of all the normal excuses, time and money. But what have you seen, not just for your own career, but what has helped people spend? What are the actions that have helped people spend more time in nature and potentially turning it into a career, or at least part of a career, so they can spend more time? What are the things that you've seen work?
You have to make it important. You have to make it a priority and make it part of your life, rather than something that you wish to do or dream to do or just happens on holidays. Ms. Bakan is a really good example in this book. She has a full-time job and she's a committed mother with 2 teenagers. You know, for her, she had full-time roles that took up her life, and then she wanted to get into hiking and the outdoors. So she had to find a way to make that fit in without disrupting her family or losing her job. So for her, she had to kind of carve that out for herself, and she had to speak to her family and say, look, this is important to me. I need you all to just cope with Sundays. I no longer exist on Sundays. I'm going out with my walking group, and you can all just do your own thing. And so she had to make that change and let everyone know that it was important. And she made that commitment to herself, to her family. She put it in the diary that on Sundays, Miswa goes walking, and just was able to make that change in that way. So I think you just got to commit to it and say, this is important to me, and let everyone else around you know that, so no one's going to just derail you from these changes. And just, you know, make it happen. You know you want to do it. So, you know, sort it out, do it.
There you go. I think one more question, Ben, from the members, and I've got one question to wrap it, and then we're going to break out and talk as groups and sessions, Jenny, which you're welcome to hang out and join if you can. And then people get to talk to each other as well as listening to us.
Sounds like a plan. Last question, and this is a nice broad one to wrap up on, from Carl Liddy, who asks, from your experience, have you learned things about what the body is capable of doing or enduring that our city dwellers might not be aware of? And if so, please can you share these insights?
You know what? I think I'm just always amazed at my ability to endure. I mean, there's no way to train for running 1,000 kilometers with a heavy backpack. It just, like, in a normal lifestyle, it just, you know, I'm day in, day out running marathons. And if I went and ran like that just once now, I would be sideways for a week. Like, I just wouldn't be able to do it. But my body has this amazing ability to adapt when I'm doing it. Yeah, I'm absolutely not an expert, and I'm pretty unplanned when it comes to the physical side of things. I just pull it off. But yeah, I think one thing that I definitely realized on these adventures is that our bodies were made to move, and they were made to be outside. And, you know, coming back to sitting at a desk is just, you know, what do they say? Sitting is the new smoking. It does feel that way when you start moving a lot more. So that's kind of all I can really impart on that one is, you know, we were made to be moving.
There you go, Carl.
Well, listen, Jenny, let's break out. We're going to break out into sessions. We've also, I should let everyone know that we had, when people voted for this month's theme and voted for your book. Do you know what you beat, by the way? It was tough competition. It was Underland by Robert McFarlane, which I read at the start this year, which is epic. Have you come across that book?
I've not read it yet, but I'm a huge Robert McFarlane fan. Yeah,
it's an incredible. It's a huge contrast to your book,
it is.
But I really recommend it because I read it at the start of the year. It's a good book to read when you're kind of tucked away in a burrow somewhere for a few days. It's all about life under the earth and the glaciers.
How often are you tucked away in burrows?
Tucked away in burrows. Well, the people we're doing a lot of it, aren't we, at the moment? But yeah, maybe not real burrows, human burrows. And then Braiding Sweetgrass was the other book on the list, which is about which a lot of people I know wanted to read as well. So so that was the competition that you won.
I'm hugely honored, everyone.
There you go. You're backed by the community. So we're going to break out into groups, and we also 40 of our members chose to donate the value of their book vouchers to in this particular vote to the Woodland Trust, which is a big charity in the UK that's trying to rewild Britain amongst many other things. So thanks to our members. That donation went this week to them. So we're going to break out into sessions for the next half hour till 8:15. There are two sessions. There's one about tough women times adventure, talking all things adventure, and one about tough women talking all things nature. So if you want to do more nature chat, go in there, more adventure chat, go into the other room in sessions. There's also networking. So if you just want to have a one-to-one with someone else who's here tonight, there are almost 100 of us. Go and do that, because that's a great way to make connections for a few minutes. We'll meet back here to wrap up the year in half an hour. Jenny, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jenny.
Take care. See you later.
Thank
Bye.
you.